So I want to spend a few minutes talking about auctions. Haven't done a video like this in a while. However, in the last couple weeks, I've been asked a couple questions about auctions, and at the same time, been in a discussion on an online forum. For those of you who don't know, I am a member of mytractorforum.com. I would highly encourage you to join. It's a great group of folks over there. But we were talking about machines being sold numerous times at auctions. And I came up with a list of tips in that discussion we were having, and I figured I should probably make a video about it because I've been asked the question through email and comments on the videos and stuff. So long-term viewers of my channel will know that I buy a lot of stuff at auctions. I really enjoy auctions. I enjoy going to auctions more than I enjoy bidding online. But at the same time, I also enjoy bidding online because I enjoy the going to pick stuff up and meeting different people, things along those lines. Got a set of notes over here that I'm going to try to at least keep me on track what I want to talk about. But what prompted this whole discussion was machines selling numerous times. So the same machine being sold numerous times through an auction company, through an individual auction company or a single auction company. And really, this has become a lot more prevalent than it was in the last 12 months with the pandemic. It has become much more prevalent. I've watched, I guess it was in April of 2020, I watched a Volvo excavator sell for $90,000. About 60 days later, it sold again, same auction company, for $75,000, and I used sold in quotation marks there. And then I think it was finally in July, they sold it for $120,000, and I haven't seen it since. And we'll get into some of the auction formats and things along those lines here in just a minute with how they can do things like that. We'll kind of get into different forms of auctions. But another example is I've seen garden tractors sell numerous times. And they'll do all kinds of weird things. They'll actually take new pictures, or they'll reuse the old pictures. I've seen them reuse the old pictures. I've seen numerous machines be sold and then they end up on Facebook Marketplace the day after from the same seller. I pay a lot of attention to who owns auction companies, etc., and who's doing. I know who's selling a lot of machines locally. So, you know, it's one of those deals that I think people need to know about those kind of things. That's not to say that the auction industry is bad, because obviously I really enjoy buying machines at auction. And, you know, I don't want this video to sound like it's completely negative. However, the reason I'm doing this video is hopefully I inform others and so they don't get trapped in a bad purchase. And so just a couple weeks ago when I bought that John Deere 400, I bought it from a very good auction company. I've never had any problems with them. I've never been concerned about any of my purchases. But there was a John Deere Z335E. It was a 2016. Had 8.2 hours on it. Sold for $2,500. You can buy them new for $25.99. The buyer at auction still had to pay 10% buyer's premium, then plus sales tax. Meanwhile, you could go buy it new and only have to pay a sales tax. Ultimately, the buyer of that unit ended up spending about an extra $100 bucks. I think it was $100 to buy that unit at auction, compared to, and it was 5 years old basically because it was 2016. So, you know, do your due diligence. Don't get caught up in it. You know, and I'll kind of go through a list here of some tips that I have. So one of the big things I would have, if you're looking at a machine at auction, watch it. Watch 2 or 3 auctions first. You know, I know that might be painful if you have money burning a hole in your pocket and you really want something now, but really watch a couple auctions. And I'm not necessarily saying you have to sit back and buy nothing, but don't make any big ticket purchases. You know, if it's a consignment auction or anything like that, watch the auctioneer, make sure you're comfortable with the bidding system. You know, I'll even sometimes go in and I'll actually bid on something that I don't want, but I know is going to sell for a pretty high price, just so I can go in and learn the bidding system. A lot of auctioneers now, a lot of auction companies now that have online bidding have practice bid spots. So it's one of those deals that, do your research, watch several auctions before you intend to buy anything. So I'll give you a prime example in my case. If you've heard of the website Government Planet or Gov Planet, it's actually part of Ritchie Brothers. They sell used government stuff, government surplus. I bought several things from Government Surplus. It can be a pretty good way to get stuff cheap. It can also be a way to waste a lot of money very quickly. And I'll give you an example of that. So I didn't want to, when I started buying stuff on GovPlanet, I didn't want to just bail off and spend $1,000 on something. Instead, what I did is I found something they would ship to me. I think my first purchase there was $35, and I could figure out their shipping system, and I'm not out much money. I think in my first purchase from Government Planet, I had about $75 in it, and that included shipping and buyer's premium and everything else. So it was one of those things that gave me a little bit of experience. Then I can work my way into a little bit bigger things, and less than truckload freights, things along those lines. They do offer that shipping option. And I'm going to try to keep the specific websites down to a minimum. But that's just the reason I provided that specific website is because it's something that's personal to me that, even though I was ready to buy stuff, it took me a while to find something that was super cheap that I could buy, that they would ship to me and I didn't have to worry about anything. And if the deal failed, I wasn't out much money, and I figured out how their system worked, and I knew I'd either like it or not. And it turns out that it's a pretty good system as long as you're paying attention to what you're doing. So really watch multiple auctions. That's probably the first tip that I have for you. Watch them. Don't get, if you're looking for a garden tractor, because that's the majority audience of this channel, there's no deal out there that is that good. Trust me, particularly to auction right now. Right now, in fact, I'll tell you that private party sales are cheaper right now than most auctions. The second tip I have is find transparent auction companies. Transparent auction companies there's lots of them out there. And what do I mean by that? It's like, do these auction companies, if they have the internet connection, obviously if it's a more rural auction, they might not have the internet connection, but do they have live audio and live video if they're doing an online auction and an in-person auction? What kind of information do they offer? Do they take lots of pictures? Do they allow you to see the other bidders that are bidding on a piece of equipment? Do they provide any sold data? In my opinion, an auction company that erases their results immediately after a sale is trying to hide something. Hands down, if it is an auction company or auction platform that doesn't report sold items, now obviously sometimes the sold data can be hard to find, which I understand, but if it doesn't, like for instance, a couple months ago I was bidding on some stuff, and at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff sold just super high. At the end of the day, I went back to check to see what the prices sold for, because I gave up after a couple lots, and price data was already gone. I couldn't even figure out what they sold for that day. So basically, you had to be watching the auction to get the price. So in my opinion, if they don't allow you to see who the other bidders are, or provide a state where they're from, or even provide some type of sold data, or they don't provide any much information, move on. It's just not worth it. Do they provide, so the third tip is, do they provide inspection times? They provide lots of pictures. And probably one of the big things, are they helpful? Now, I don't want you to confuse helpful with busy. Because a lot of times auctioneers, because they lead up to a sale, are extremely busy, but they are still generally helpful. If they get on the phone and they're not providing any answers to your questions, or very vague answers, chances are, they don't know and they have other plans. At the same time, you can't call them up and, say I'd like to place a absentee bid for half of what something might actually sell for. I mean, yeah, you can do that, but chances are the auctioneer is probably not going to really like and give you the time of day. And so, but a lot of the auction companies that I use, everybody that I've talked to on the phone, even if they're super busy, they're always helpful. They answer my questions. I've never had a bad experience at an auction company I like going to on the phone or even through email. Email is a little bit more prevalent than it used to be, or even Facebook. Not that I would ever recommend you use that to contact them first, but even now there are auction companies are much more responsive through email and Facebook than they used to be. Used to, you just had to call them, but now they're getting quite a bit better. And like I said, just don't confuse helpfulness with being busy, because being busy, I mean, they might be short and stuff, but they'll at least try to get you to answer your question. And you have to remember, I mean, if you're looking at a piece of, a John Deere garden tractor, and they're selling $150,000 or $200,000 quad track units for a farm, chances are they're not going to have very much time to deal with $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 garden tractor. They're going to be focused on the bigger ticket items. Willing to work with you on pickup and stuff. Obviously, if you buy something online, a lot of times terms are terms for buying stuff online. So don't necessarily think that every auction company will work with you, because some of them just can't. The time frame, the contracts with the sellers, so on and so forth. But most of them, I have found most auction companies to be willing to work within their constraints to get a product to you. Just a couple weeks ago, I randomly found something online that I wanted. It was about 6 hours away. There was only one item I wanted. Shipping wasn't listed. It was an online auction, but said nothing about shipping. Called the auctioneer up. Auctioneer was super nice on the phone. He's like, yeah, if you want it, we can ship it to you. He's like, we'll just charge, $5 packaging fee and we'll ship it to you. I ended up winning it. Worked out great. He was helpful. I mean, yeah, I think it was only $150 sale for him, but in the end, he wanted to keep his customer happy, and I mean that's what happened. And like I said, sometimes terms are terms, and there are no exceptions to those terms, and that happens, particularly when it comes to, say, industrial pickup times, things along those lines. That's just how it's going to be. And probably one of the fourth one I'm going to talk about is the sale history. Understand the sale you're going to, or the sale you're bidding at online. Because I'll just go through a couple different types. So you can have an estate sale. You can have a consignment sale, you can have liquidation, asset reduction, list goes on and on. But those are the kind of the four that I'm going to talk about. And they're all four very different for the pieces of equipment you're going to see there. So think about that when you're considering what to buy and those products and so on and so forth. If it's an asset reduction, so dealers have asset reduction sales all the time. So why is that particular unit an asset reduction sale? Why is a all-wheel steer X485 in an asset reduction sale versus you never see, or very limited do you see X748 in an asset reduction sale? That's because the X485 has less demand, or a lot of times you'll see X724s in asset reduction sales for dealers. So the type of merchandise that can be there, type of machines that can be there, are going to be very different for different types of sales. So estate sales. If it's an estate sale and they're selling individual pieces of equipment, you can have a bunch of different aspects at play. Chances are there's only going to be one or two things that, large ticket items. So if it's an estate sale and you're after a garden tractor, there's only going to be one 425 or one 335 or one 455 for the whole sale. And so chances are more people are going to be there bidding on that. But at the same time, the machine is, and obviously by looking at it, you can decide if it was taken care of or not. Wasn't used commercially, or maybe it was, but that would go under liquidation, I guess, at that point. So estate sales can be good or bad. I mean, typically I buy very, very few machines from estate sales. Estate sales are very high priced most of the time, because there's so few machines there. Everybody's there to get it. And you can look into, if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, you can always look up auction theory, which is pretty interesting to read about. So now let's talk about consignment sales. In the spring, particularly this time of year, being April and May, consignment sales, if a machine is at a consignment sale, it is there for a reason. Period. End of story. So that 400 I bought a couple weeks ago that I did a video on. So it's a John Deere 400. Runs great. What's the problem? Why was it there? Well, I can go ahead and tell you, and I'll actually do a video on it. The deck didn't turn, which we talked about briefly in my introduction video. The front wheel bearings are absolutely shot, and I'll cover that in a future video. And third, there is something not quite right with the hydrostatic, and I haven't figured out what that is yet. But that is, I'm sorry, not the hydrostatic, fuel system. And I don't know why I said hydrostatic. There's something not quite right with the fuel system. I haven't figured out what it is yet, but there's something that's not quite right there in that machine. Same thing with that 3235A that was in that same video. I just kind of briefly showed it. It's a turf. It's a fairway mower. Why on earth is that thing at a consignment sale? Well, I can tell you right off, it's been really well maintained. It's a really nice machine, but it definitely has some hydrostatic linkage problems. And it's got a few little details that are just off enough to create a number of issues if you were going to use it on a golf course. That's what I found out since I bought it. So anytime you're talking about a consignment sale, you need to make sure that you go in with your eyes wide open. You don't get tunnel vision. You're not looking at a particular machine just because it's there. So many times I watch people show up at auctions, and because they're there and they have a trailer, they're bound and determined to leave with something. And that, like I said, that goes across anything, any type of item, not just garden tractors. And so, and one of the things I have on my page over here, it's your job to know why prior to bidding, or know. You want to know why it's there, and you want to know that prior to bidding. And you also know at a consignment sale, you know that there's probably something wrong with it if it's at a consignment sale. Liquidations, if it's a business liquidation, you got to know what kind of, did the business fail? Is it just a retirement? If it's a retirement, did they mentally check out 6 months ago and not do any maintenance? All things to think about. So, I mean, those are just a couple things that I've thought about with auctions. If you have questions about auctions, feel free. I mean, by no means am I an expert. I'm really quickly going to go through some of the horror stories that I have seen in the past 12 months. I've already given you that Volvo excavator example. Also this year, I've seen an auction company that was using 2 different online platforms plus a live auction at the same exact time. And so basically, because I have a lot of different accounts for various platforms, in this particular case, they were using proxy bid and high bid. Like I said, I don't really necessarily want to call out names, but I have accounts for both of those. And so what I was able to do is I was able to log in, and I could see, how they were doing the bidding. Basically, if they weren't happy with the price on one platform, and keep in mind, this was not announced to any of the bidders. They just basically took the other electronic platform as a floor bid and sold it to the floor bid. My guess is proxy bid and high bid, I think it was high bid, probably do not like that format. And so one of the things that I guess I have not addressed is platforms. Platforms are very different from individual auctioneers. Lots of auctioneers use proxy bid. Lots of auctioneers use high bid, K bid. Then you have individual sellers, big iron, stuff like that. There's lots of different platforms out there. But that auction that I watched, I literally watched them bid. I watched somebody there bid the two online platforms up to whatever was up there. They just bid it up until they didn't want to bid anymore. And some of the stuff resold a few weeks later at another auction. Some of it didn't. And then I kind of lost track of it because the auctioneer was terrible. Just not a. I don't think I could ever buy anything from that auctioneer or auction company. I have seen items sell numerous times. I could probably sit here and list dozens and dozens and dozens of items that have sold numerous times or that have been relisted. I think of a specific example. This is in Iowa. There was a 332 up for bid. The closing bid on this 332 was like $4,000. And a John Deere 332 is not worth $4,000. Period. End of story. I mean, for $4,000, you can get in a 455. But because it was restored, the seller has evidently an account, and he or someone bid it up for I can't remember the exact selling price. But this guy has because I've watched enough of his auctions and stuff, he has a reputation for doing this. And so I kind of figured he was going to do it. But basically, within about 3 hours of the auction ending, that 332 was on Facebook for sale. It was on Craigslist for sale. And I don't know if he ever sold it. He's been trying to sell a couple machines for going on 5 or 6 years now. And he has not sold them, even though he's put them up for auction numerous times. Other examples, I gave you that 335 where people have just overpaid for something. Do your homework before you attend an auction. I cannot stress that enough. Know what you want to pay and set a limit and run with it. That is probably one of the biggest flaws that I see with people. The attitude of I'm there and I'm just going to buy it. I don't care. Now, keep in mind that sometimes you just got to do that. I mean, honestly, I've had that attitude at auctions before, but it's something that I wanted regardless. I have never done that with garden tractors or anything like that. It was something that meant something to me or something along those lines, reminding me of my childhood or, I'm coming up with just random examples now. But really, it's one of those things that do your due diligence before you go or before you bid online. Make sure that you're not going to overpay. And if you do, I cannot tell you the number of times in the last 12 months that somebody has sent me a message. And I will go ahead and tell you, if you send me an email asking, hey, how much should I pay for this? Chances are it's probably going to take me somewhere between 2 and 7 days, if not longer, to get back to you. Evidently, I've offended some people in the last year because I have been honest and have provided my honest opinion because they asked for it. Well, evidently, my honest opinion was less than what they actually paid, at which point they are unhappy with me. Nothing I can do about that. So, and I don't have, geographical regions will vary. Although I think everybody has the opinion that around them there's no garden tractors and everything's higher priced than everything else in the country. That's just the feeling I get. I'm not trying to be too sarcastic there, but that's really the feeling that I get. It's kind of like plowing. When you start talking about, well, how many bottoms will this tractor pull? Well, the tractor will pull this many bottoms here, but I've got the worst dirt and, or the worst soil and, this side of the Mississippi or whatever. And, it's like dirt around here. We can't do that. We have to drop by. We can't pull 4 bottoms. We got to pull 3. And so, but it's the same thing with, geographic region. Geographic region does matter, but still that goes back to doing your due diligence, figuring out the sold example, stuff like that. Now that I've droned on for 25, almost 26 minutes, if you have questions, comments, leave them below. Hopefully this was helpful. Save somebody a little bit of money. And like I said, if you really want it, I guess you can always just buy it, but sometimes it doesn't make sense to do that. So, have question, comments, leave them below. Thanks for watching.